some reflection there by Dak Prescott. Cris Carter, what does he have to do this season to be successful?
He's got to be a guy that when they decide to drop back, because defenses at certain portions of the game will take them out of their running game because they don't have a variance of things they can do offensively besides Ezekiel Elliott up the middle, Ezekiel Elliott off tackle, Ezekiel Elliott around the outside. Once teams start to get a book on that, and there will be games, there will be quarters where they will not be able to run the football as good as they are up front and as good as Zeke is.
Yep.
And in those situations, they're going to force Dallas to be able to throw the football, which they did last year, and they were not consistent enough. Dak wasn't great as far as reading coverages. He wasn't great as far as coming off the #1 receiver, going to #2. And as far as once the play broke down, when the play was off schedule, he was not as good as he was in year #1 or the Dak that we saw at Mississippi State. So in those areas, when the defense is dictating that Dallas must throw the ball, he has to be more consistent with how he's going to deliver the football.
In this article where he gave this quote to Albert Breer, Monday Morning Quarterback, he also broke down for Albert 2 specific interceptions from last season that he said basically these are the types of plays I can't make. One was a misread with Dez Bryant where Dez broke deep, and he said the pass could have been fair caught. 2 guys could have picked it off because basically we were on different pages. Now he seemed to be taking accountability for that, but obviously things like that are one of the reasons Dez Bryant's no longer with Dallas. The other play, though, was a little more troubling in that they were down 22-6. It was the 4th quarter. He was trying to make a play, and he throws across his body, doesn't get enough on it. It's returned 90 yards for a touchdown. So they were in a scoring zone to try to cut it to a 1-score game. Ends up being a 3-score game. The game's over. And so those are obviously mistakes he didn't make in year 1. But in large part, those were mistakes he didn't make in year 1 because weren't a lot of times they're down 22-6. Weren't a lot of times that in the 4th quarter he had to go out there and make plays. So for him to be successful, all those things you talk about he has to do. But for him to be considered a success this year, it's to me very simple. The Cowboys have to be a playoff team. Because if I tell you, they got the best running game in football. They have a defense that at this point has become slightly underrated. They've been a top half of the league defense each of the last 2 years, and 2 years ago it was a top 10 defense. So if your defense is average, let's call it average at worst, you have the best running game in football, the best pass protection, or one of the best pass protection units in football, then if you are not a playoff team, what's it about? It's about your passing game. And I know the passing game has guys that did your job, but it's primarily about the guy that does that job. So for him to be viewed as a success, it's going to be about winning, as he mentioned. It's going to be about, are the Cowboys back in the playoffs?
Let me follow up on that, though, Nick. You said it's going to be about this guy, but it's no secret that the Cowboys have the 29th ranked receiving corps. And that's got to be an issue, right, Cris Carter?
Well, this game can be played without wide receivers, but it makes it more difficult. And when you don't have the guy pulling the trigger, who Coach Mangini, when he sits here, calls a force multiplier, then it becomes almost impossible. Like, you move the ball through the running game, but you score points in the passing game because offense is hard to methodically move down the field 8 to 12 plays. So if you don't have those big chunks, 12, 20, 30-yard chunks, that's what the offense needs. In Dallas, when Dallas has been successful, when they had the triplets, Michael and Troy and Emmett, what they did, they ran the ball on people and scored in the passing game. But they could do either one when they wanted to. This Dallas team, with their lack of weapons, it's hard. It's hard on Zeke. It's harder on the quarterback. But Dak has to be able to. He said he's harder on himself. Okay, we're going to see, because I'm going to be pretty hard on him. Okay. All right? And the wide receivers, they have to be able to get in chemistry with Dak and be able to make big plays on they have no identity right now. They have one receiver that had a 1,000-yard season, and that was several seasons ago. So who is going to be their guy, how they're going to do it, and to me, people like Cole Beasley, they're going to have an outstanding year.
Tavon Austin, maybe.
However they're going to use them.
Correct. And so, but here's the reason that I think it's going to be totally fair for you to be hard on him, for Dak to be under a microscope this year. I understand he has, and you mentioned 29th ranked, that's according to Pro Football Focus. You can make a case that's a little too complimentary for, given what those guys have accomplished in the NFL. I understand the team's done him no favors by the wide receiver talent they put around him. But if I'm talking about what's important to a quarterback's success, the number one thing I would rank is how good your offensive line. Because if you have a terrible offensive line, you got no shot. If you know you're going to be clean, if you know you're not going to be pressured in the first 2 seconds, that's the biggest advantage any quarterback can have, at least in my eyes. A bigger advantage than an all-pro wide receiver. Because you got to have time to get the ball to an all-pro wide receiver. Now, you can make an argument, would a quarterback rather have a bunch of stud wide receivers or an amazing running back to take pressure off him? That's debatable. But of the three things that a quarterback needs, he's got A pluses in 2 of them. So he's in a beneficial situation overall, at least the way I view it. You seem
Nick,
skeptical.
And I know that you don't think wide receivers are important.
No, that's Colin Cowherd.
But let me tell you
that's
something.
Not me.
Okay, now, unless you are a transcendent quarterback, you tell me someone in the NFL that's winning with average wide receivers. Okay? It's hard to impossible to do. So, yeah, we can sit here on the show and be like, yeah, I'd love to have an offensive line. But how many of those dominant offensive lines are going to the Super Bowl? All right? We don't see that. So the modern game has changed. People are advancing the ball, and they are doing it through the air. And Dallas has one of the worst receiving cores. If you look at them, the Jaguars, the Cardinals, the Bills, between the 3 or 4 of them, like those are the worst groups in the league. And I don't see championship aspirations out of that group except the Jaguars. And the reason why? Because they're going to have a top 5 defense. So saying that having one good wide receiver compared to the collection of offensive linemen, you have to have 3 good offensive linemen to have a good offensive line. You just need 1 wide receiver to make sure that you got a competent wide receiver group.
Sure, but the Cowboys do have those 3 offensive linemen. I wouldn't rather have one stud left tackle versus a stud receiver. I wouldn't rather have pick Joe Staley or Tyron Smith over Antonio Brown. But the collection of offensive linemen he has is as good as any or better than anybody in the league. And so I think the security of that is incredibly valuable to
no problem. That's it. His mentor, Colin Cowherd's had a negative influence on him. I understand. No problem.
I didn't call you guys icing on the cake the way Cowherd did.
Listen, even though Nick might not appreciate me, his wife, Danielle's like, man, you need a wide receiver, Nick. You need a little fancy in your life. You need a little step. You need a little pop.
Skilled players for a reason, for sure. Dak's work is cut out.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.